Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. said he is very disturbed over the arrest of a further 5 in a suspected Chinese spy ring. In this clip, Marcos is asked whether the alleged sleeper agents had spied on Philippine bases open to the US military, known as EDCA sites.
That's why we arrested them, because of course we are very disturbed by anyone conducting such espionage operations against our military.
Are the suspects state-sponsored? And if they are just the tip of the iceberg, just how extensive is this network? Joining us today are Liou To-hai, National Chengchi University College of International Affairs Adjunct Distinguished Professor, and Chen Ping-kuei, National Chengchi University Department of Diplomacy Professor. Very warm welcome to both of you on the show today.
Thank you.
The Philippine National Bureau of Investigation, or NBI, said the 5 Chinese nationals arrested on January 30th, that you can see here standing behind those seated, including Romeo Brawner, Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines on the right, have been identified as Tsai Xiaohuang, also known as Richard Tan, Zheng Haitao, also known as Lestrade, Wu Zhengting, also known as Braun, Wang Yongyi, also known as Watson, and Wu Jinran. Officials said the 5 men had posed as tourists on the Philippine island of Palawan using high-resolution solar-powered cameras and, in some reports, drones to monitor Philippine Coast Guard and Navy movements in the West Philippine Sea. They said the 5 were linked to another suspected Chinese spy, Deng Yuanqing, arrested just 10 days earlier in Manila, along with his 2 Filipino accomplices. Deng was found with high-spec data-gathering equipment capable of sending coordinates and topographic details, potentially useful for drone operations or precise targeting. He had collected detailed maps of government facilities and military bases and targeted critical infrastructure, such as power plants and navigational lighthouses. Professor Tan, let me come to you first. So, pretty exhaustive surveillance operation going on there. What was your reaction?
I think the surprising part is how high-tech it is regarding the equipment they use. So these specific equipments can record very detailed information about the buildings, the personnel, the terrain. So they can be very important and useful intels.
Professor Liu, but what's behind it? What is all this information being gathered for?
Obviously, China is targeting at the United States because U.S. forces like Subic Airport International and Subic Naval Forces are all actually under operation of the United States. So that is why they need to gather this kind of detailed information about their daily operation. So in that case, if anything happened or something unusual, if they found, they can respond accordingly.
Right.
So this is very important. I think this is #1 priority. Then the rest, of course, is about the U.S.-Filipino military collaboration, in particular about Typhoon missiles, because that could pose the security threat to China as well. Yeah.
And so you view this as likely to be state-sponsored surveillance?
I think this time it's for sure from the states, because you can easily find out those advanced, information gathering, electronic products, equipment.
Right.
And those suspects' identity. So you can easily identify they were trained by Chinese communists or PRA.
And so, Professor Chen, drilling down a little bit on what Professor had said in terms of it, they are targeting the US operations. What sort of scenario is it most likely that China is trying to gather information on in order to thwart? This seems to be to monitor and to thwart.
So these kind of information, when they gather this information, they want to use it in combat operations. So basically, everything that is not revealed by satellite images. So, for example, the maintenance of the ship, the personnel who operate on the ship, their schedule, where they live, and where do they get supply, who are their suppliers. So these are useful intels if somebody is trying to sabotage the U.S. or Filipino military or Coast Guard.
Right. Perhaps there is one goal, which is about sovereignty in the South China Sea, and then there's another one, and essentially we're talking about a Taiwan crisis.
So I think those are interlinked, right? So the U.S. collaboration with the Philippines is a threat to the POA, and it's a threat to PRC's naval operation in South China Sea. So of course, China has an interest to gather more intel about Filipino activities and their joint operations with the U.S. military.
Okay, and so, Professor, how concerned do you think the U.S. would be at this news?
Of course, for the United States, obviously they can found that China actually has been gathering the information from the U.S. bases there. So in the future, they are going to be more cautious in this regard, and also heavily involve the Philippines investigation to find out what kind of information they have already gathered.
Right, yes, that's what we would definitely expect that. And Professor Chen, authorities say that Deng was a graduate in control or automation engineering at China's PLA University of Science and Technology based in Nanjing. What sort of information does that give us then about his skills and perhaps his objectives?
So obviously, it gives us the background of this man. So maybe he has the skill of intelligence. He has the skill of engineering to find and fix, maintain those surveillance equipments. He knows the equipment well, and he can teach somebody else to operate them. So this man could be, I would say, could be a hub in the Chinese spy network in the Philippines. So this will be a very important event. That's why the Filipino Bureau of Investigation can track down and find out another 5 people there.
Yeah, and from one of the Rappler reports, one of the suspects, he was actually found siphoning off data, the equipment was, and transmitting it in real time to China. So this we were talking about, as Professor had said, very high-tech equipment, and what you were saying, probably therefore state-sponsored.
We need to know that university, PLA Science and Technology University, you know that university initially was focusing on telecommunication college first, and then merged with Air Force Institute of Meteorology, and then with the PLA General Staff headquarters. So in that case, that is why you can easily find out in terms of his equipment, it's advanced equipment, and he's an expert in engineering school as well as the telecommunication and electronic equipments.
Right. Okay. Now, Manila suspects Deng was a sleeper agent. Here's Deng's Filipino wife. They have a 8-year-old child.
Isa lang po ang masasabi po, hindi po spy si Ching po. Na matagal na po siya naninirahan dito sa Pilipinas. Mahigit 10 years na po siya dito.
She says Deng's surveillance equipment was needed for his job related to self-driving cars. Authorities said the suspects have been living and working in the Philippines legally for decades with Filipino wives before they were caught undertaking suspicious activities. The NBI said they were all members of legitimate civic groups operating in the Philippines. Chao-Xing, a volunteer group of the Philippines, and the Philippine-China Association of Promotion of Peace and Friendship. On Deng's phone, there were photos of deposit slips ranging in value from $25,000 US to $205,000 US of payments made to shell companies. Professor Chen, so what do some of these details tell us about how they maintained their cover?
So I think that confirms what Dr. Liu just said, right? They are state-sponsored. There are many indications to prove that those are state-sponsored espionage activities. So another thing is that I think whether these people are sleeper agents, I think I have more reserve about that because sleeper agents are very costly. You have to put them in the target societies and for a very long time and wake them up when necessary, right? But from my perspective, I suspect these people has been operating in the Philippines for a while. Maybe since 2010, maybe since this person, Deng, ever entered the Philippines the first time in 2002. So I suspect that these spy networks has been operating in the Philippines for a while, but they expanded their activities. So they became more suspicious and more easily to catch them.
Right, okay, so you believe that the operation has been consistent, just perhaps lower key.
Yes.
And it's been ramped up recently. Professor Liou, would you agree with Professor's analysis? You wouldn't class them as sleeper agents, or do you think there is some room to classify them as such?
There's a strong possibility. Why? Because you can easily find out the Philippines is a sort of the strategic intersection between the marine powers and land powers. So, and then Philippines also embraced the South China Sea, as well as the Western Pacific. In particular, it is bordering with our Taiwan through the Pashi Channel. So in that case, no matter for competing with the United States in the region, or cross-strait confrontation, U.S. might come to rescue Taiwan, or invite troops in the region to help Taiwan. Everything is very important for China in terms of the most powerful state in this region. So that is why China wants to gather this kind of very detailed information for their reference, in case anything happened.
Right. So you are saying that in terms of the long lead time, perhaps 2002, that it's entirely feasible because these are, we knew that China was wanting, obviously Taiwan, that's been a long-held ambition, and also the South China Sea from 1980s, 1990s, so it's not beyond the pale. Professor Chen, if you would help us to go back in time to the early 2000s, what were China-Philippine relations at that time? And then we'll also talk about China-Taiwan relations, when theoretically these agents could have first been placed or planted, if they were sleeper agents.
I think the relations between the two are okay during that time. At least we know that the territorial dispute was not very strong during that time. Remember that China started to fortify the South China Sea islands in late 2000s. So
I think earlier though. They took Mischief Reef in 1985.
Well, that's true. That's true. Right. Yeah. But to use to form the artificial islands and build more arms on it, that's later, right? The dispute between Philippines and China has been there for a while, right? But it has not been that intense like nowadays. So the relationship was stable, at least not hostile. So during that time, China and Philippines also have a lot of personnel exchange and trade. So trade was expanding, and the tourism was expanding as well. So it was a time when nobody talks about missiles, but cooperation.
And Professor Liou, why don't we take a look at cross-strait Taiwan-China relations in the early 2000s? What was it like then?
Actually, I would like to add something more about the early 2000s, because at that time, U.S. was preoccupied with the terrorist attack, September 11, right? It happened in 2001, right? So for China, that's a premier chance for China to expand its influence into the ASEAN. So that is why Chinese made the proposal to form the FTA. Agreement with the ASEAN as a whole in 2001, and they reached that agreement in 2002. So that at that moment, China actually had the positive relationship with Philippines. At that time, Philippines was under the presidency of the Aroro, so they have positive relation. So that is why it's just to reflect what I just mentioned about. Given the Philippines' strategic importance, China needed to plan ahead. Okay, even though they have very positive relationship, they still need to prepare for the worst scenario. That's exactly what happened later.
And that's what the CCP is very good at doing. They always look at the long game. Professor Chen, Joshua Espena, who's an international relations expert at the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, in Philippine media has talked about, what Professor has said, the geostrategic importance of the Philippines, and he's saying that it's turning the Philippines into kind of rather like what Berlin became in the Cold War. Do you think there's some truth in that statement, given the geostrategic importance of the Philippines?
If we're trying to compare it with Berlin, that would be a little bit different, because to say that Berlin was a hub spot for espionage activities is because that's where the information exchanges. That's where two superpowers control Germany, and they try to consolidate their control in East Germany and West Germany. However, in the Philippines, that would be a front line. When you are in the front line, you need a lot of information that can help you to win the combat in the future, or or help you to get advantage in negotiation or on negotiation table. So I think we can say there must be a lot of espionage activities in Philippines right now. So as you said in the beginning, this might be a tip of the iceberg. And that's why I think the Filipino president was very concerned about this.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit more about this being at the tip of the iceberg, Professor. If this is just the tip of the iceberg, what are we looking at if we consider the entire iceberg? Because we saw the extent of the monitoring, the surveillance, really quite vast. I mean, we had critical infrastructure, military bases, government bases, detailed maps, data being transmitted in real time. Therefore, what does the iceberg represent?
Just like what I just mentioned about, it's about grand strategy when it comes to the Sino-US strategic tit for tat in the region, right? Because Philippines, actually, in reality, Philippines now is the only ASEAN country who dared to confront China directly. Used to be Vietnam, but Vietnam now turned to the bamboo diplomacy. Try to be flexible, try to maintain a positive relationship with both the United States and China, even Russia, but not Philippines. So Philippines obviously made the choice to ally with the United States. So in that case, this is the most important or most likely place China and US will fight in South China Sea, plus Taiwan's strategic location. So that is why you can easily find out this kind of very intensive, this kind of espionage activities in Philippines. But I always said it's not like Berlin. Berlin is different.
Right, you agree
because
on
now the situation, already Professor Chen already mentioned about Berlin. Actually, it was divided by the two different camps, communist states and the democratic countries. Right. But Philippines is a sovereign state, and it's a marine power, and then it's relevant to marine power against land power.
Okay, and Professor Chen, does this spy ring that we're hearing details of, obviously ongoing details will be coming out, does it give us clues to what must also be happening in Taiwan and maybe in Japan as well, where there's also American bases? Well,
actually, we can imagine, we cannot be too naive about this, right? That we can imagine in each country, each place, there will be an espionage network.
Sort of deeply entrenched and operating over decades.
Maybe, yes, because, so you can imagine the US and the Philippines keep very, very close eye on the South China Sea islands, right? So they may also have similar surveillance. In terms of Taiwan or Japan, you can imagine there must be some kind of this network too. So each time when the network has a breach, We should be happy about it. We should be more optimistic about it. So I say, on the other hand, the Philippines actually has an optimistic part about it, right?
Yeah.
So we
So
can.
this is a win, you mean, for
this
the
is
Philippines?
at least this is a win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, on the same day that the Philippine government paraded the 5 new suspects before the media on January 30th, President Marcos said he would have the US Typhoon mid-range missile system removed from the Philippines if Beijing agreed to stop intimidating Filipinos in contested waters. The Typhoon has been the target of many months of Chinese state criticism. Take a look.
I don't understand the comments on the Typhoon missile system. We don't make any comments on their missile systems, and their missile systems are 1,000 times more powerful than what we have. So I don't understand. Let's make a deal with China. Stop claiming our territory. Stop harassing our fishermen and let them have a living. Stop ramming our boats. Stop water cannoning our people. Stop firing lasers at us, and stop your aggressive and coercive behavior, and return the Typhoon missiles.
So, Professor Liu, how can we understand Beijing's behavior?
I think China has already tried several times to negotiate with Philippines directly. The only thing they can reach the agreement is about resupply of those daily equipment for the second Thomas Island, which Philippines put a warship there. So the rest about Typhoon, from Chinese perspective, it's relevant to China's relationship with the United States. From Chinese perspective, Philippines actually does not have the right to make this kind of decision. It's up to the United States whether the United States would like to put the Typhoon missile systems there or not.
Okay. Professor Chen, I'd like to get your take on the idea of Philippine agency. It seemed to me, that the Philippines itself wants to have this missile system. It wants to buy, it's going to train its military on it, and it wants to purchase this system, and it sees this as a counterweight against China.
So it actually has some truth in it. I think I agree with Dr. Liu's comment, because right now it is the United States who deployed the Typhoon system in the Philippines. And last month, in late December, the Philippines showed intent to buy the Typhoon system for themselves. So I think when I saw Marcos's comment, I feel like those comments, those demands are very specific. And it is really doubtful that China would conform with it, right? China would stand by and say, okay, I would not do these things, so you ask the US to retract the Typhoon system. I don't think this is a real way to open dialogue. I would say this is a way to tell China that we have Typhoon system now, we can get more, so you better stop what you're doing. You better start to negotiate with us.
President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr.'s offer to China, or challenge to China, that if China would stop its coercive and expansionist actions in the South China Sea, President Marcos would return the missile launchers back to the United States. Okay, let's have to understand why, in the first place, those missile launchers were, of course, deployed here in the Philippines by the United States Army in April 2024. It has to do, of course, with developing the Philippines' strategic deterrence against what it perceived as China's expansion. So eventually, of course, the United States agreed to deploy those Typhoon missiles, which caused much alarm in China, knowing for a fact that those missiles, of course, those launchers would, of course, threaten Chinese coastal areas, and of course will be a fly against the ointment in China's anti-access area denial strategy against the United States Navy. So of course, China has basically launched a well-coordinated, orchestrated diplomatic effort to force the Philippines at withdrawing those launchers from its territory, despite the fact that this is a sovereign decision by two allies, the United States and the Philippines. So President Marcos, in a way, is challenging China. If you want us to have those launchers stop, then stop your aggression and expansion in the South China Sea. Of course, everyone knows for a fact that China is really determined to effect its maritime expansion in the South China Sea. So basically, this will also mean that the Philippines would make sure that those missiles, those launchers remain in the country in the face, of course, of China's growing aggression against the Philippines in terms of deploying its Coast Guard vessels and ships of the People's Liberation Army's Navy into its, not only in its exclusive economic zone, but also within its archipelagic water. And it also acts as a sort of deterrence just in case China would, of course, launch an armed invasion of Taiwan, given, of course, the geographic proximity of the Philippines and Taiwan, and the fact that once the United States becomes involved in a major military action in Taiwan against China, then, of course, the Philippines would have no choice but to support its treaty ally. And, of course, those missiles would remain in the Philippines as long as, of course, we are confronted with Chinese maritime expansion in the South China Sea. U.S. Defense Secretary Hegseth called our National Defense Secretary Gibo Teodoro and had a conversation regarding the importance of maintaining the alliance in the light, of course, developing deterrence, and, of course, providing the Philippines an ironclad commitment despite the change in administration in the United States from the Biden administration to the Trump administration.
We're going to have to end it there. Thank you so much, Liou To-hai and Chen Ping-kuei, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.